I gripped the deck railing as the crane operators made their final adjustments, watching our 3 submersibles bob in the Pacific swells like oversized bath toys. 3 years of preparation, and now it all came down to whether these metal spheres could actually get us to the bottom of the world and back. "Dr. Schmidt, you ready for this?" Izzy appeared beside me, her weathered hands already stained with hydraulic fluid from the pre-dive checks. She had this way of moving that screamed competence. Every gesture deliberate, nothing wasted. But I'd caught her staring at the water earlier with an expression I couldn't quite read. As ready as anyone can be for something nobody's ever done before. I twisted my wedding ring, a habit I'd never managed to shake even 3 years after the divorce. "How are you feeling about the descent profile?" "Piece of cake." Her grin was quick, practiced. "Though I gotta say, the funding for this mission is pretty incredible. New everything, backup systems for the backup systems. Makes you wonder what they're expecting us to find down there." Before I could respond, Aiden practically bounced over to us, gripping a tablet against his chest. The kid, and at 29, he really was just a kid compared to the rest of us, had been buzzing with nervous energy all week. "Carol, I wanted to double-check the sample collection sequence one more time." He pushed his glasses up his nose. "When we reach the seafloor, do you want us to focus on the geological formations first, or should we prioritize the biological specimens?" I'd already gone over this twice today. "Geological first, then biological. We need to understand the substrate before we start disturbing it." I looked at his face. "You seem more stressed than usual. Everything okay?" "Just excited." His laugh came out too high. "I mean, this is Challenger Deep. Nobody's been down there with this kind of equipment before. The data we're going to collect could change everything." Remy Schneider walked over to our small group, moving with that careful Swiss precision that made him such a skilled pilot. He gave each of us a quick nod, then turned his attention to Aiden. "The navigation systems are set, but I'd like to go over our emergency ascent procedures once more." "We've been over this," Aiden started. "We'll go over it again." Remy's tone brooked no argument. "I've been doing this for 15 years, and the ocean doesn't care about your timeline." I liked Remy. He had this careful approach that reminded me of my father. Measure twice, cut once. But even he seemed more wound up than usual, going over systems again and again that had already passed inspection. "Where's Russell?" I asked, scanning the deck. Our 3rd team member had been scarce all day. "Making another call." Izzy jerked her thumb toward the communications array. "That guy's been on the radio more than mission control." I spotted him near the stern, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low tones. Russell Bryant was quiet and competent, but there was something about him that felt off, like he was playing a different game than the rest of us. The ship's intercom crackled to life. "All dive teams to stations. We're beginning submersible deployment in 15 minutes. My stomach did a little flip. 3 years of planning, and suddenly 15 minutes felt like no time at all. "This is it," Izzy said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Hope you're not claustrophobic." "Too late to find out now." I tried to match her casual tone, but my voice came out strained. Aiden was already heading toward his submersible, tablet pressed tight against his chest. Remy followed, but not before giving me a look that seemed almost apologetic. Russell finished his call and walked over, slipping his phone into a waterproof case. "Ready to make history?" Something like that. I watched him secure the case in his equipment bag. "Important call?" "Just checking in with the family." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You know how it is." Except I didn't know how it was, because Russell had never brought up having a family before. In 3 years of mission planning, he'd been a complete blank slate about his personal life. The crane operators started their engines, and the sound cut through the evening air like a warning. I took one last look at the horizon, where the sun was painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Beautiful, but it also meant we'd be going down in complete darkness. "Time to go," Izzy said, already heading toward our submersible. "Try not to think about the 11 kilometers of water we're about to put over our heads." Thanks for that mental image. But I followed her anyway, my boots clanging against the metal deck. The submersible looked smaller than it had during training, much smaller. I climbed through the hatch and settled into my seat, immediately surrounded by screens, gauges, and switches that would keep us alive in the most hostile environment on Earth. Izzy dropped into the pilot's seat and began her pre-dive checklist with practiced efficiency. Communications check, life support green, ballast tanks ready. She looked at me. "You sure you want to do this? Because once we start down, there's no changing your mind." I strapped myself in and turned on my recording equipment. "Let's go see what's down there." The crane lifted us off the deck, and suddenly we were swaying over the dark Pacific. Through the porthole, I could see the other 2 subs getting ready for launch, their lights already bright in the growing darkness. "Surface control, this is Deep One," Izzy spoke into her headset. "Ready for deployment." "Deep 2 ready," came Aiden's voice through the comm system, tight with excitement. "Deep 3 ready." Russell's voice was calm, professional. The crane lowered us toward the water, and I felt that well-known moment of change as we went from being an aircraft to becoming a submarine. The ocean closed over our viewport, and the world above vanished. "Beginning descent," Izzy announced. "Next stop, the bottom of the world." I watched the depth gauge start its long climb toward numbers that still seemed unreal. 11,000 meters, deeper than Mount Everest was tall, deeper than anything had a right to be. The last traces of sunlight disappeared above us as we passed the 100-meter mark, and I realized there was no turning back now. Whatever was waiting for us in the deepest place on Earth, we were committed to finding it. I spun my wedding ring as the depth gauge hit 1,000 meters, watching the last weak traces of blue fade above us. The water outside our porthole had turned into that complete black you only find in the deep ocean. The kind of darkness that makes you understand why old sailors thought monsters lived down here. "Deep 2, how's your descent looking?" Izzy's voice crackled through the comm system, steady and professional. "Beautiful," came Aiden's reply, practically vibrating with excitement. "I'm getting readings I've never seen before. The water clarity is incredible at this depth." Remy's voice came through next, more careful this time. "Deep 3 reporting normal descent, but I'm getting some weird sonar readings. Could be thermal layers." Russell's answer was short. "Deep 4 experiencing minor equipment issues. Nothing serious." I looked over at Izzy, who was jotting down notes on her clipboard while watching the controls. Her hands had picked up a small shake that wasn't there on the surface. "You okay?" "Just the usual pre-dive jitters." She grinned, but it looked forced. "You know what I was thinking about? My nephew Tommy. Kid's 8 years old and obsessed with submarines. When I get back, I'm going to tell him his Aunt Izzy went deeper than anyone's ever gone before." "That's sweet." I activated the water sampling system as we passed 2,500 meters. "You talk about your family a lot. I don't think I've ever mentioned mine during a dive. Different coping mechanisms, I guess." Izzy adjusted our descent rate slightly. "I like remembering there's a world up there waiting for us. Keeps things in perspective when you're surrounded by all this." She gestured at the black water outside. Through the comm, Aiden was practically narrating his descent. "Passing 2,000 meters now. The pressure readings are exactly what the models predicted. This is incredible. We're already deeper than most research subs ever go.
Kid's got enthusiasm, Izzy muttered, then keyed her mic. Deep 2. Try to contain your excitement. We've got 8 more hours of this. I was watching the water samples cycle through the collection system when something caught my eye. A fish, looked like some kind of deep-sea cod, swam past our lights, but it was moving wrong. Instead of the usual steady swimming pattern, it kept jerking to one side, like it was confused or hurt. Izzy, did you see that fish? Which one? She leaned forward to look through the porthole. It's gone now, but it was swimming erratically. Might be nothing. At 3,000 meters, Remy's voice came through with a note of worry. I'm getting some weird readings on my sonar. There's a warm water mass about 2 kilometers ahead. Temperature difference is pretty big. How significant? I asked, pulling up our own thermal sensors. Nearly 3 degrees warmer than surrounding water. That's unusual at this depth. Izzy made a face at her navigation display. I'm seeing it too. Looks like we'll need to adjust our descent path to avoid it. Why avoid it? Aiden's voice was eager. Shouldn't we investigate? This could be a previously unknown thermal vent system. We investigate after we reach the bottom safely, Izzy replied firmly. No detours on the way down. Russell's voice came through with heavier static than before. Deep 4 agrees with course change, keeping safe descent profile. I'd noticed his radio calls getting shorter and shorter. Back in training, he used to chat more. Russell, you doing okay over there? You said something about equipment trouble. A pause. Just some small calibration problems with the recording gear. Nothing that messes with dive safety. Something about his tone bugged me, but I couldn't figure out what. As we passed 4,000 meters, Izzy started talking again. You know what I'm gonna do when this mission's over? I'm thinking about opening a diving school down in the Keys. Teach tourists how to explore coral reefs instead of... She waved around us. This. Retirement plans already? Not retirement. Career change. Her voice got quieter. I've been doing deep sea work for 20 years, Carol. Maybe it's time to try something where the sun actually reaches. You're one of the best pilots I've ever worked with. The deep sea research community would hate to lose you. Yeah, well, she adjusted our ballast tanks. Sometimes you gotta know when to walk away. There was something in her voice. Not just tiredness, but something deeper. Like she was running from something instead of toward something new. At 5,000 meters, I collected another water sample and right away noticed the difference. The marine life was definitely thinning out, which was normal, but the few creatures I could see were acting strangely. A jellyfish drifted past, pulsing in an odd rhythm. A small squid shot by in a panic, inking for no obvious reason. The wildlife's acting weird down here, I said, making notes. Weird how? Stressed, disoriented, like something spooked them. Aiden's voice buzzed through the comm. I'm seeing the same kind of patterns. Might be connected to that heat signature we picked up earlier. Or could be our lights and engine noise, Remy added pragmatically. We're not exactly subtle visitors. At 6,000 meters, all 3 subs hit the thermal layer Remy had spotted. The water temperature jumped from just above freezing to nearly 4 degrees Celsius, a huge difference for the deep ocean. This is definitely not normal, I said, watching my instruments. Thermal vents don't create this kind of widespread temperature increase. Could be a large-scale geological event, Aiden suggested, though he sounded more excited than concerned. Maybe we're witnessing something unprecedented. Izzy was looking over her navigation charts. Whatever it is, it's making us take a more eastern route to the bottom, adding about 30 minutes to our dive time. Deep 4, are you seeing this thermal anomaly? I asked. Russell's response came through heavy static. Confirmed, adjusting course accordingly. I looked unhappy at the radio. Russell, your signal's getting worse. Are you having communication problems too? Some interference, probably related to the thermal layer. But Aiden and Remy's signals were coming through fine. As we changed direction around the warm water mass, Izzy became more talkative, like she was trying to fill the growing quiet. You know what Tommy asked me last week? He wanted to know if there were monsters in the deep ocean. I told him no, just fish that look scary because they live in the dark. What did he say to that? He said, maybe the fish look scary because they're trying to warn people to stay away. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Smart kid. I looked out at the complete darkness surrounding us, broken only by our artificial lights. We were now deeper than Mount Washington was tall, with 5 more kilometers to go. The pressure outside would crush a human body instantly, and we were trusting our lives to a metal sphere and some very sophisticated engineering. Izzy, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really take this mission? I mean, you could have your pick of any deep sea project. Why Challenger Deep? She stayed quiet for a long moment, her hands steady on the controls. Because some places need to be seen by people who understand what they're looking at. And because... She paused. Because I have a feeling this might be my last chance to see something truly unknown. Last chance? Like I said, I'm thinking about that diving school. But something in her tone hinted at a completely different meaning. The depth gauge showed 6,500 meters and rising. Outside, total blackness surrounded us, interrupted only by the rare glowing pulse of some deep-sea creature. We were descending into a part of the ocean that humans had explored maybe a dozen times in history, and I was beginning to understand why so few people ever came back wanting to return. I pressed my face against the porthole as we touched down on the seafloor with a soft thud that shook through the hull. 10,900 meters, the deepest anyone had ever gone and lived to tell about it. Welcome to the bottom of the world, Izzy said, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands as she worked the controls. How's it feel to be making history? Surreal. I activated the external floodlights and watched them cut through the darkness, revealing a landscape that looked like another planet. Gray sediment stretched in all directions, broken by rocky outcroppings that cast strange shadows in our artificial light. It's so... empty. But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't quite right. The ocean floor looked different from what our satellite mapping had predicted. Smoother in places, like something had been dragging across it, or building on it. Deep 2 reporting successful touchdown. Aiden's voice crackled through the comm, vibrating with barely contained excitement. Initial geological survey shows standard abyssal plain formations. Beginning sample collection now. Standard formations. Right. Except I could hear something else in his voice. An edge that suggested he was looking for something specific. Something he expected to find. I deployed the collection arms and started gathering sediment samples, watching the mechanical claws scoop up handfuls of old mud that had been sitting here since before humans existed. The samples looked normal enough, but the ground underneath felt wrong somehow. Too consistent. Deep 4 reporting touchdown. Russell's voice finally came through after nearly an hour of radio silence. Beginning exploration of assigned sector. Russell, what are your exact coordinates? I asked, checking my navigation display. We should maintain visual contact when possible. A pause. About 200 meters southeast of where you are. The ground is... tricky. Izzy looked unhappy at her instruments. I'm not picking up Deep 4 on sonar. You sure about those coordinates? Confirmed. Some interference with the positioning system. I caught Izzy's eye.
Russell's voice had that same guarded quality he'd used when talking about his family, like he was picking each word with extra care. Deep 3 here. Remy's voice cut through the static. I'm experiencing some navigation system malfunctions, switching to manual controls. Despite his calm tone, I could picture him running through emergency procedures with that methodical precision of his. What kind of malfunctions? Izzy asked. Compass is spinning, GPS is giving impossible readings. Could be magnetic interference from the seafloor composition. I was adjusting the sample collection arm when something caught my eye. A small school of deep-sea fish, looked like some kind of snailfish, was hovering near a rocky outcropping about 50 meters away. But they weren't swimming around randomly like fish usually do. They were bunched together, almost like they were protecting something. Izzy, you see those fish? She leaned forward to look through the porthole. Yeah, strange behavior for this depth. Usually they're more spread out. I turned on the external cameras and zoomed in on the cluster. The fish were clearly agitated, swimming in tight circles around the same spot. It's almost like they're guarding something. Or warning us away from it, Izzy muttered, echoing her nephew's words from earlier. 20 minutes into our seafloor exploration, I'd collected enough samples to keep the lab busy for months, but something was bugging me. The terrain we were seeing didn't match the geological surveys. Too many smooth patches, too many perfectly round rocks. Deep 2, what's your sample analysis showing? I asked. Fascinating stuff, Aiden replied, though his excitement sounded forced now. Sediment composition is exactly what we'd expect for this depth and location. Very standard. Pretty normal. He kept saying that, like he was trying to convince himself as much as us. I was about to answer when Izzy grabbed my arm. Carol, look. She was pointing through the porthole at something ahead of us. At first I thought it was just another rock formation, but then I saw it. A faint glow, barely visible against the black water. Not the harsh white of our floodlights, but something softer. Almost alive. What is that? I don't know. Izzy's voice had dropped to a whisper. But it's definitely not geological. The glow came from what looked like a natural ridge in the seafloor, but as we got closer, I could see it wasn't natural at all. The light was pulsing, very slowly, like something breathing. Deep 2, Deep 3. Are you seeing any unusual light sources in your sectors? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Negative, Aiden replied quickly. Too quickly. Nothing here, Remy confirmed. Just standard rock formations. But Russell didn't respond at all. I turned on the recording equipment and began documenting what we were seeing. My scientific training was yelling at me to investigate, to understand what could possibly be creating light at this depth. But something deeper, more basic, was telling me to turn around and swim away as fast as possible. Should we get closer? Izzy asked, though her hands were already moving us forward. I watched the faint glow pulse in the darkness ahead of us and felt my understanding of the deep ocean beginning to crack around the edges. Whatever was down here with us, it had been waiting in the dark for a very long time. Yeah, I said, my mouth dry. Let's go see what's making that light. I stared through the porthole as our lights swept across what looked like the most beautiful and unbelievable thing I'd ever seen. The seafloor ahead of us was covered in a massive network of glowing structures, delicate web-like formations that stretched as far as our beams could reach, pulsing with soft blue-green bioluminescence. What the hell is that? Izzy breathed, her hands frozen on the controls. The structures looked almost organic, like some kind of deep-sea coral, but they were too organized, too deliberate.
They formed complex patterns that reminded me of neural networks or circuit boards, spreading across hundreds of meters of seafloor in perfect geometric arrangements. "It's incredible," I whispered, activating every recording device we had. "This is completely unknown. There's nothing in the literature about formations like this at abyssal depths." Izzy slowly moved us closer, the submersible's lights showing more detail with each meter. The bright strands were about as thick as my arm, see-through and beating with that steady light. They linked bigger nodes that looked almost like living processors, each one shining brighter than the connecting strands. "Deep 2, are you seeing this?" I called into the radio. Aiden's voice came back right away, crackling with static. "Confirmed, Deep 1. I'm documenting extensive bioluminescent formations. This is unprecedented." But something in his tone bothered me. He sounded excited, sure, but not shocked. Not the way someone should sound when discovering something that rewrote the textbooks. "Deep 3, what's your status?" Izzy asked. "I'm seeing similar formations," Remy replied, his voice tight with concentration. "But I'm also finding something else. Perfectly circular pits in the seafloor. They're arranged in geometric patterns." "How big are these pits?" I asked, trying to process what we were looking at. "Exactly 12 meters in diameter, every single one. The walls are too smooth, too precise. This isn't natural geological formation." My stomach dropped. 12 meters exactly. That kind of precision didn't happen in nature. "Deep 4, Russell, what are you seeing in your sector?" I called. A long pause, filled with growing static. Large formations everywhere, starting to collect samples from the outer structures. "Sample collection?" Izzy frowned at the radio. "Shouldn't we be documenting first? Understanding what we're looking at before we start disturbing it?" But Russell didn't respond. I watched the bright network pulse around us, the glow seeming to travel along the strands like electrical signals. The patterns were too organized, too structured. This wasn't just some unknown species of deep-sea organism. This was something else entirely. "Izzy, move us along the edge of the formation. I want to see how far it extends." She guided us alongside the glowing network, and I felt my scientific worldview breaking apart with each meter we traveled. The formation stretched beyond our lights in every direction, vanishing into the darkness like a massive underwater city. The nodes were linked by several strands, creating backup pathways that looked almost like a communication system. "This is impossible," I muttered, making notes as fast as I could write. "The energy requirements alone. What's powering this? There's no thermal vent activity, no obvious chemical source." "Deep 2, what's your analysis of the bioluminescence?" I asked. "The light appears to be generated by specialized cells similar to those found in deep-sea organisms," Aiden replied, but his answer sounded rehearsed. "Though the scale and organization are unusual. Strange. That was like calling the Grand Canyon a small ditch." As we pushed further into the formation, I noticed the static on our radio was getting worse. "Communications are breaking up," I told Izzy. "Could be interference from whatever's making this glow. Or maybe it doesn't want us talking to each other," she said quietly. I looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, look at this thing, Carol. Really look at it. This isn't some random biological formation. This is organized, purposeful, and I swear it's reacting to our presence." She was right. As we moved through the network, the pulsing grew stronger around us, the light racing faster along the strands closest to our submersible, like it was following us. "Deep 3, describe these pits you're finding," I said into the radio. Remy's voice crackled through the static. 12 meters across, about 15 meters down. The walls are completely smooth,
almost like they've been polished. They're set up in a six-sided pattern, each hole exactly 50 meters from the next one. 50 meters. Six-sided layouts. This was starting to sound less like natural rock formation and more like something built on purpose. Are you seeing anything inside the pits? Negative. They appear empty, but... His voice faded into static. Deep 3. Repeat your last transmission. Nothing but static. I tried Russell again. Deep 4, please respond. Nothing. We're losing contact with the others, I told Izzy, fighting down a growing sense of unease. Maybe that's not an accident, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I was about to ask what she meant when something ahead caught my eye. One of the bigger nodes was flashing differently than the rest, its glow brighter and faster. As we got closer, I could see it sat right in the middle of a thick tangle of connecting threads. That one's different, I said, pointing through the porthole. Izzy changed our direction toward the central node. It's like a hub. All the other strands connect to it. As we got closer, I realized the node was much larger than the others, maybe 3 meters across and perfectly round. The surface looked smooth, almost metallic, but it pulsed with that same living light. This is definitely not biological, I said, my voice shaking slightly. The geometry is too perfect, the materials too uniform. Someone built this. Built it? Izzy stared at me. Carol, we're 11 kilometers underwater. Who could have built something like this? I didn't have an answer. The structure spread around us in every direction. A huge network of glowing connections that had been sitting here in the darkness for who knows how long. The engineering needed to build something like this was beyond anything humanity could pull off, especially down this deep. We need to document everything, I said, trying to focus on what I could control. This changes everything we know about the deep ocean. But even as I said it, I couldn't stop thinking about how Aiden hadn't seemed surprised at all. The way Russell kept collecting samples like he knew exactly what he was looking for, and how this whole mission had gotten more funding than any deep-sea research project ever. Izzy, I said slowly, what if we weren't the first ones to find this? She looked at me, her face pale in the glow from the instruments. What do you mean? What if someone already knew it was here? The network pulsed around us, its strange light washing our faces in changing patterns of blue and green. And in that moment, I realized we weren't explorers making a discovery. We were visitors to something that had been waiting for us in the dark. The first dead fish floated past our window like a pale ghost, its body reflecting our lights for just a moment before vanishing into the black water above us. That's weird, I muttered, watching it spiral upward. Fish don't usually die at these depths without a reason. Izzy barely looked up from her instruments. Happens all the time down here. Pressure changes, temperature shifts, old age. The deep ocean's not exactly a retirement home. But then another one floated past. Then 3 more. Within minutes, we were surrounded by an underwater blizzard of corpses, dozens of pale fish bodies drifting upward in a twisted snowfall. Okay, that's definitely not normal, Izzy said, her voice tight. Her hands were shaking more now as she worked the controls, trying to navigate around the floating bodies that kept bumping against our hull with soft, hollow thuds. I switched on the external cameras and began recording everything. The fish appeared untouched. No visible injuries, no signs of sickness or attack. They were simply dead, all of them floating up from the same direction, as if something below was forcing them toward the surface. Deep 2, are you seeing this? I called into the radio. Aiden's voice came back tight, missing that excited edge he'd had earlier. Confirmed, Deep 1. Massive fish die-off in my sector. I'm documenting approximately... Jesus, there's so many of them. What's causing it? I asked, watching another cluster of bodies drift past our lights. Unknown. But Remy, you should move your position about 50 meters northeast. The concentration seems lighter in that area. I stared at the radio with annoyance. How would Aiden know where the concentration was lighter? He was supposed to be focused on his own sector, not directing Remy around like some kind of mission coordinator. Deep 4, what's your status? Izzy asked. Russell's voice came through the static. I'm getting the same readings. We should grab some samples for testing. Specimens? I stared at the radio. Russell, we don't know what killed these fish. Could be toxic, could be infectious. Standard protocol is to avoid contact with dead marine life of unknown origin. The research value outweighs the risk, he replied, his tone matter-of-fact. We may not get another opportunity to study mortality events at this depth. Research value. Right. Because that's what you think about when you're surrounded by hundreds of dead fish in the deepest part of the ocean, the research opportunities. I'm with Carol on this one, Izzy said, maneuvering around a particularly large cluster of bodies. Something killed all these fish, and I'd rather not find out what by getting too close. But Russell wasn't listening. Through the murky water, I could see lights moving in the distance, probably his submersible, heading directly toward the thickest concentration of floating corpses. I pressed my face against the porthole, trying to get a better look at the fish drifting past. Most of them looked like typical deep-sea species. Snailfish, cusk eels, some kind of amphipods. But as I watched more carefully, I started noticing things that made my stomach turn. Izzy, look at that one. I pointed to a fish floating just outside our viewport. Does that look normal to you? She leaned over to check it out. The fish was about the size of my hand, but something was wrong with it. Extra fins stuck out from its sides, and what looked like more gill slits ran along its stretched-out body. That's not right, she whispered. Another body drifted past, this one with eyes that were way too big, bulging from its skull in a way that didn't match any species I knew. Its body was stretched out, like someone had put it through a taffy machine. These aren't just dead fish, I said, my voice barely steady. These are wrong, deformed. The radio crackled with more static as bodies kept hitting our hull. Deep 3, report your status, I called. Remy's voice came through broken and chopped up. Having engine problems, navigation systems, interference getting worse. What kind of engine problems? Izzy asked, but the only response was white noise. I watched the stream of dead, twisted creatures floating upward around us, all coming from those perfectly round pits Remy had found. Like something down there was pushing them up, driving them away from whatever was hiding in those smooth-walled holes. Russell, you need to back away from the concentration, I said into the radio. These fish show signs of severe genetic abnormalities. Whatever killed them could be affecting living tissue at the cellular level. Negative, Russell replied, his voice calm despite the static. Sample collection is priority. Mission parameters require biological specimens from any anomalous events. Mission parameters. He was talking like this was all part of some predetermined plan, like dead fish raining down around us was just another item on his checklist. Since when do mission parameters override basic safety protocols? I demanded. But Russell didn't answer. The static was getting worse, and through the murky water filled with floating corpses, I could see his lights moving deeper into the field of death, collecting samples of creatures that shouldn't exist. Izzy's hands were shaking badly now as she fought to keep us stable. Carol, I don't like this. The interference, the dead fish, the way everyone's acting. Something's really wrong here. I nodded, watching another twisted creature drift past our viewport. This one with what appeared to be extra vertebrae extending its spine into an unnatural curve. Whatever was happening down here, it had been going on long enough to affect the local marine life in ways that went against everything I knew about biology. And somehow, I was starting to think Russell had known we'd find exactly this. I pressed my face against the porthole, trying to make sense of what I was seeing through the cloudy water filled with floating corpses. The largest pit Remy had described was maybe 200 meters ahead of us, and something was moving inside it. "Izzy, do you see that?" She followed my gaze, squinting through the darkness. "See what? All I see is dead fish and... oh shit." The pit wasn't empty anymore. Something massive was rising from it, moving with deliberate fluid motions that made my stomach drop. At first, I thought it might be some kind of geological event, maybe gas or sediment being expelled from the seafloor. But then I saw the tentacles. They emerged slowly, each one thicker than our entire submersible, covered in patches of bioluminescent tissue that pulsed with the same rhythm as the glowing network. The creature kept rising, revealing more of itself with each passing second, a body that looked like someone had crossed a colossal squid with something prehistoric and wrong. "Emergency ascent," Izzy said, her voice deadly calm as her hands flew over the controls. "Right now." But I couldn't look away. The thing was huge, easily the size of a blue whale, but it moved with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. Its body was covered in those same glowing patches, creating patterns that seemed almost like communication signals. And its eyes, when they caught our lights, they reflected back with a focus that was definitely predatory. "Deep 2, Deep 3, emergency ascent immediately," Izzy barked into the radio. "We have a massive biological contact rising from the seafloor." Aiden's voice came back through the static, and something about his tone made me stop cold. He sounded calm, not panicked, not shocked, calm. "Confirmed, Deep One. I'm documenting the emergence. This is exactly what we hope to find." Exactly what we hope to find? I stared at the radio like it had just grown a second head. "Aiden, what the hell are you talking about?" I demanded. "Get out of there." But the beast was already moving, its huge tentacles cutting through the water faster than I'd expected. I watched in terror as it made a beeline for Russell's spot, moving with way too much purpose for this to be some random hunt. "Deep 4, evasive maneuvers," Izzy screamed into the radio. Russell's voice crackled through, broken and distorted. "Can't. System's not responding. Something's wrong with..." The transmission died in a burst of static, and through the murky water I saw lights. Russell's submersible, being swallowed by those enormous tentacles. The creature coiled around Deep 4 like it was crumpling a tin can, and Russell's screams pierced through the radio interference with horrifying clarity. The sound lasted maybe 10 seconds before it stopped completely. "Russell!" I shouted into the radio, but there was nothing. Just the soft groaning of metal being compressed beyond its limits, transmitted through the water to our hull. Izzy was already pushing our engines past their safety limits, the cavitation from our propellers creating a cloud of bubbles that temporarily hid our position. But the creature had spotted us now, those alien eyes turning in our direction with unmistakable intelligence. "Deep 3, what's your status?" Izzy called. Remy's voice crackled back, tense and barely controlled. "Running evasive maneuvers. This thing's got the whole ascent route blocked, trying to find another way up." The creature's body was huge enough to fill the entire space, its tentacles sweeping through the water in search patterns that looked way too organized. This wasn't some mindless deep-sea predator. This thing was hunting us with a plan. "Aiden, where are you?" I demanded, scanning the water for Deep 2's lights. I'm maintaining position to document the encounter, he replied, his voice still unnaturally calm. This is unprecedented. The size, the behavior patterns, the bioluminescent communication system. Are you insane? Izzy shouted. That thing just killed Russell. But even as she said it, I was starting to understand something that made my blood freeze. Russell hadn't been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He'd been positioned exactly where the creature would come up, like he was supposed to be there, like he was bait. The creature's focus turned toward us, and I could see its tentacles changing direction, moving to block our escape route. Izzy pushed the engines harder, but we were already at maximum safe power, and the thing was catching up to us. The network, I said suddenly, watching the glowing strands around us pulse faster as the creature moved through them. It's reacting to the creature's presence. The glowing web was definitely responding to the massive predator, its light growing brighter and more rapid, but I was too terrified to analyze what it meant, too focused on the tentacles that were now close enough to see the suckers lining their undersides. Through the chaos, I spotted Deep 2's lights moving in a pattern that didn't make sense. Instead of running away, Aiden was positioning himself between us and the creature, though whether he was trying to protect us or sacrifice himself, I couldn't tell.
Aiden, what are you doing? I called.
Following protocol, he replied, and something in those two words made everything click into place. This wasn't a research mission that had gone wrong. This was a research mission that was going exactly according to plan. I screamed as the massive tentacles wrapped around our submersible, the metal groaning under pressure that should have crushed us instantly. But instead of the death I expected, the entire seafloor erupted in light. The glowing network blazed with brightness that hurt to look at, every strand and node pulsing in perfect sync. What I'd thought was some kind of communication system suddenly showed its true purpose as the web-like structures began tightening around the creature with mechanical precision.
What the hell? Izzy started, but her words were cut off by a sound I'll never forget. The creature's roar of pain vibrated through the water and into our hull, a noise so deep and alien it made my bones ache. The bioluminescent strands weren't just glowing anymore. They were cutting, slicing through the creature's flesh like molecular wires, leaving trails of dark blood that clouded the water around us. The thing that had seemed so powerful moments before was now thrashing desperately against bonds it couldn't break. "It's a trap," I whispered, watching the network tighten around the beast. "The whole thing is a containment system." Izzy wrestled with the controls, working to break us free from the creature's loosening hold as it thrashed in pain. Our hull ground against its tentacles, but the beast was too busy trying to survive to keep its grip on us. "Deep 2. What's your status?" Izzy shouted into the radio. Aiden's voice came back clear and calm, completely wrong for someone watching a creature being torn apart piece by piece. "I'm documenting the interaction. This is exactly what the models predicted." I stared at the radio. "Models? What models?" "The containment protocols are functioning perfectly," Aiden continued, his tone clinical. "Network response time was approximately 47 seconds from initial breach detection. Restraint efficiency is optimal." "You knew," I said, the words coming out flat and cold. "You knew this would happen." Through the murky, blood-filled water, I could see lights approaching. Deep 3, with Remy coming to extract Aiden like this was all part of some predetermined plan. The creature's struggles were getting weaker as the glowing strands sliced deeper, its massive body being systematically carved apart by whatever technology powered the network. "Aiden, you son of a bitch. You knew about the creature and the network," I said into the radio. "I was sent to document their interaction," he replied matter-of-factly. "Previous encounters suggested the containment system remained functional,
But we needed confirmation. Previous encounters. Russell positioned exactly where the creature would emerge. The mission's crazy funding. The way everyone had been acting like they expected something specific to happen. Russell was bait, I said, watching the creature's death throes through our cracked porthole. You used him as bait to trigger the system. Russell understood his role, Aiden said. His sacrifice provided valuable data about breach protocols and containment response times. Izzy finally broke us free from the dying creature's grip, our damaged hull scraping against its flesh as we pulled away. The network was almost done with its work, the massive predator reduced to chunks of meat sinking back toward those perfectly round pits. Emergency ascent, Izzy announced, her voice shaking as she pushed our failing engines past their limits. Life support is compromised, and we're taking on water. I looked back at the seafloor as we rose, watching the glowing network return to its quiet state, like nothing had happened. The creature was gone, its remains disappearing into the depths, and the old security system was ready to wait for the next breach. How long? I asked into the radio. How long have you known about this? The network has been active for approximately 60 years, Aiden replied, still recording as Remy's submersible moved to escort him to safety. We've been studying it through controlled encounters since the first accidental discovery. 60 years of cover-ups. 60 years of feeding people to the depths to test an alien containment system. And I'd been stupid enough to think we were explorers making history. Our ascent alarm was screaming now, warning us about rapid decompression and system failures. Izzy was fighting to keep us alive as we climbed through 11 kilometers of crushing darkness, our hull integrity failing with every meter. Carol, she said quietly, not taking her eyes off the controls. Whatever we saw down there, whatever this really was, they're never going to let us talk about it. I nodded, watching the depth gauge count down our escape from the deepest place on Earth. We'd found something humanity wasn't ready to understand. Something so old and complex that it made our technology look like children's toys. But we hadn't found it first. We'd just been the latest test subjects in someone else's long experiment with forces beyond our understanding. The black water pushed against our failing submersible as we climbed toward a surface that suddenly felt very far away. The first thing I felt when we broke the surface was 11 kilometers of water finally lifting off my chest. The emergency floodlights hit our cracked porthole like a slap, and I actually started crying from relief. We made it, Izzy whispered, though her hands were still shaking on the controls. Jesus Christ, we actually made it. Our hull groaned like it might split apart any second, and the life support system kept making these awful grinding noises that meant we were breathing recycled poison. But we were alive, floating under real stars instead of that alien glow from the network. The rescue divers were already in the water before we'd fully stopped moving, their lights cutting through the darkness as they swam toward our failing submersible. I could hear voices over the radio, surface control coordinating the extraction, medical teams preparing for casualties, someone barking orders about containment protocols. That last part made my stomach drop. Containment protocols, like they'd been expecting this. Can you move? Izzy asked, trying to unbuckle her harness with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. I nodded, though everything hurt. My head was pounding from the decompression, and there was this metallic taste in my mouth that meant we'd been breathing toxic fumes for hours. But I was functional enough to climb out of this metal coffin. The rescue divers attached cables to our hull and started hauling us onto the research vessel. Through the porthole, I could see the ship's deck swarming with people, medical teams, technicians, and way too many guys in suits for a scientific mission. Deep 2 surfacing now, came Aiden's voice over the radio, calm as if he'd just finished a routine training dive. 20 minutes. They'd come up 20 minutes after us, which meant they'd taken their time down there. probably collecting more of their precious data while Izzy and I fought to keep our dying submersible from becoming our tomb. The crane lifted us out of the water, and I got my first look at the research vessel's deck. It was chaos, but organized chaos, like they'd done this before. Medical personnel swarmed our submersible the moment it touched down. The hatch opened with a hiss of escaping air that smelled like metal and fear, and suddenly there were hands pulling me out, voices asking questions I couldn't process, bright lights that made my head throb even more. I hit the deck, and my legs just gave out. 1 second I was standing. The next I was on my knees with someone wrapping a blanket around my shoulders and checking my pulse. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" A medic was shining a light in my eyes, checking for signs of decompression sickness. "Carol Schmidt," I managed. "Dr. Carol Schmidt. Any pain? Difficulty breathing? Nausea?" All of the above, but I was more focused on watching Aiden's sub getting pulled from the water. Deep 2 looked almost perfect compared to our wreck, its hull undamaged and systems apparently working fine. Like he'd known exactly how to avoid the worst of whatever had hit us. They pulled Aiden out first, and he was walking. Actually walking, steady on his feet, talking calmly to the medical team like he'd just gotten back from a nice afternoon dive. No decompression sickness, no toxic exposure, no trauma from watching Russell get ripped apart by something that shouldn't exist. "The other pilot," I said to the medic. "Izzy Curtis, is she?" "She's alive," he assured me, helping me to my feet. "Severe decompression sickness, possible toxic exposure, but stable. We're taking you both to the infirmary." They loaded me onto a stretcher, even though I insisted I could walk. As they wheeled me across the deck, I caught fragments of radio chatter that made my stomach drop. Containment protocols are in effect. Classified material recovery team is standing by. No unauthorized personnel near the survivors. Containment protocols. They'd been planning for this before we even went down. The infirmary was a clean white room that smelled like disinfectant and fear. They put me on a bed next to Izzy, who was out cold and hooked up to an oxygen mask. Her face was gray, and there were dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there 6 hours ago. "She kept us alive," I told the nurse who was checking my IV. "Whatever else happens, remember that. Izzy Curtis kept us alive when everything went to hell." The nurse nodded politely, but I could tell she thought I was babbling from decompression sickness, which was probably what they wanted her to think. Aiden walked into the infirmary under his own power, looking like he'd spent the day at a spa instead of 11 kilometers underwater watching people die. He saw me staring and had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Carol," he said, approaching my bed. "I'm glad you made it up safely." "Are you?" I asked. "Because you seemed pretty calm about the whole thing, almost like you knew what was going to happen." He looked around the infirmary, checking who could hear us. "The decompression can mess with your head, cause memory issues. It's normal to feel confused after what we've been through." Memory issues. He was already setting things up to make anything I said sound unreliable. "I remember everything," I said quietly. "The network. The creature. Russell being used as bait. Your complete lack of surprise when that thing came out of the pit." Aiden's expression stayed the same, but something changed behind his eyes. "You should rest. The medical team needs to keep an eye on you for the next several hours." A doctor walked over with a clipboard, asking me to describe what I'd seen during the dive. I started telling him about the glowing network, the twisted fish, the huge creature that had killed Russell. But the more I talked, the more worried the doctor looked. "Bioluminescent hallucinations are common with severe decompression," he said, making notes. "The brain creates vivid, often terrifying imagery when deprived of oxygen. It wasn't a hallucination, I insisted. Ask Aiden. He saw everything I saw. The doctor turned to Aiden, who shook his head sadly. Dr. Schmidt was under extreme stress. Our submersible experienced some equipment malfunctions, and we encountered normal deep-sea formations that may have appeared unusual under the circumstances. I stared at him. Normal formations? You called it exactly what you hoped to find. I never said that, Aiden replied calmly. You may be misremembering due to the decompression effects. The doctor scribbled more notes, and it hit me. I was being systematically torn apart by someone who'd been right there, who'd witnessed everything I had. Aiden was rewriting history as we spoke, transforming our brush with something beyond explanation into faulty gear and stress-related delusions. Izzy moved restlessly in the next bed, mumbling something through her oxygen mask. I leaned closer and caught pieces of what she was saying. The lights. The network. It was waiting for us. The doctor made a face and adjusted her sedation. Delirium is common, with severe decompression sickness. She'll be more coherent once the nitrogen clears her system. But I knew Izzy wasn't delirious. She was remembering the same unbelievable things I was, and they were drugging her to keep her quiet. Through the infirmary's small window, I could see the sun rising over the Pacific. We'd been in the depths for over 12 hours, and now we were back in a world where what we'd experienced couldn't exist, where old networks and guardian creatures were just hallucinations brought on by too much pressure and not enough oxygen. The thrum of approaching choppers made everyone in the infirmary look up. Not medical aircraft. These were military, unmarked, coming in fast and low over the water. Transport's here, someone said over the intercom. Prepare survivors for immediate evacuation to secure medical facility. Secure medical facility. Not a hospital. Somewhere they could control what we said and who we said it to. As they prepared to move us, I caught Aiden's eye one more time. He looked almost sorry, like he genuinely regretted what was happening. But not enough to tell the truth about what we'd found in the deepest place on Earth. The helicopters were landing on the ship's deck, their rotors whipping the morning air into chaos. Soon we'd be airborne, heading toward whatever came next in this carefully planned cover-up. I closed my eyes and tried to hold on to every detail of what I'd seen in the depths. The glowing network, the creature's intelligence, Russell's sacrifice, Aiden's betrayal. They could drug me, discredit me, make me disappear entirely, but they couldn't erase what had actually happened. The truth was down there, waiting in the darkness, and someday, someone would have to face it. I stared at the manila folder they'd placed in front of me, my hands still trembling from whatever they'd put in my IV 3 days ago. The conference room was aggressively beige. Beige walls, beige table, beige carpet that probably cost more than my annual salary. 5 people in identical dark suits sat across from me like they were conducting a job interview, instead of destroying my life. Dr. Schmidt, the woman in the center began, consulting her tablet. We appreciate your cooperation during this difficult time. We understand the trauma you've experienced. Trauma, as if I'd just watched a car crash, instead of seeing Russell get ripped apart by something that had no right to exist. Let's review your statement from yesterday, she continued. You reported seeing bioluminescent formations on the seafloor that you interpreted as some kind of network or communication system. I didn't interpret anything, I said. I documented what I observed. Organized structures displaying coordinated behavior patterns that... Dr. Schmidt, the man to her left, held up a hand. We've consulted with marine biology experts who've reviewed your footage. What you observed were standard chemosynthetic bacterial mats, common at hydrothermal vent sites. The apparent organization was an optical illusion caused by equipment malfunction and extreme stress. I laughed, which probably wasn't the reaction they wanted. Bacterial mats don't slice creatures apart with molecular precision. The 5 suits looked at each other. The woman jotted something down on her tablet. You also reported encountering a large cephalopod that you described as attacking your team member's submersible, she said. However, our analysis indicates Mr. Bryant's vessel suffered catastrophic hull failure due to manufacturing defects in the pressure housing. Manufacturing defects. I leaned back in my chair. That's what you're calling it. The wreckage has been thoroughly examined by independent engineers, the man said. There's no evidence of external damage consistent with biological attack. Of course there wasn't. They'd had 3 days to clean up whatever evidence might have contradicted their story. 3 days while I was out cold in their medical facility, breathing air that tasted like metal and forgetting things I knew I should remember. What about Izzy's testimony? I asked. She saw everything I saw. Another look passed between them. The woman checked her tablet again. Ms. Curtis has been debriefed separately. Her account differs significantly from yours, Dr. Schmidt. She reported equipment malfunctions and standard geological formations, consistent with the evidence we've recovered. My stomach dropped. That can't be right. Izzy was there. She saw the network, the creature, everything. Ms. Curtis has accepted our findings and signed the appropriate documentation, the woman said. She's been compensated for her trauma and has agreed to maintain confidentiality about the mission details. Paid off. They'd bought her silence, probably with enough cash to open that diving school she talked about. Smart woman. Smarter than me, apparently. Where's Aiden? I asked. I want to hear his version of events. The man smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. Dr. Lee provided extensive testimony during his debriefing. Would you like to review his statement? He slid another folder across the table. I opened it and read Aiden's account of our mission, feeling sicker with every paragraph. According to him, we'd encountered normal abyssal plain formations, collected standard sediment samples, and experienced minor equipment issues that required early ascent. Russell's death was a tragic accident caused by submersible failure. The strange marine life behavior was attributed to our lights and engine noise disturbing the ecosystem. No mention of the glowing network, no creature, no systematic dismemberment of something that had lived in the depths for God knows how long. Just a routine research mission that ended in mechanical failure and one unfortunate casualty. This is complete fiction, I said, closing the folder. Aiden was documenting everything. He called it exactly what they hoped to find. Dr. Lee's recordings show only standard geological formations, the woman replied. Perhaps the stress of the situation caused you to misinterpret his scientific enthusiasm. They had an answer for everything. Every piece of evidence explained away. Every witness either bought off or made to look crazy. I was starting to get how they'd kept this secret for however long they'd been throwing people to whatever lived down there. How many? I asked. Excuse me? How many expeditions have you sent down there? How many people have seen what I saw and ended up sitting in rooms like this? The silence dragged on long enough that I knew I'd struck a nerve. The woman jotted down another note on her tablet. Dr. Schmidt, we understand you're struggling to process what happened. Extreme depth exposure can cause vivid hallucinations, false memories, even paranoid ideation. It's more common than you might think. Show me, I said. I'm sorry? You keep talking about how common this is. Show me the other cases.
Show me the other survivors who've sat in this room and been told their memories were hallucinations. Another long silence. Then the man reached under the table and pulled out a thick file folder. He placed it in front of me with the careful precision of someone handling explosives. "What you're about to see is classified at the highest levels," he said. "Disclosure of this information to unauthorized personnel is a federal crime punishable by life imprisonment." I opened the folder and immediately wished I hadn't. Photos, dozens of them. Submarines crushed like tin cans, their hulls bearing marks that looked exactly like what I'd seen happen to Russell. Sonar readings showing massive biological contacts rising from the ocean floor. Footage of the glowing network, captured by cameras that had somehow survived when their operators didn't make it back. And reports, mission after mission, dating back to 1962. Each one describing encounters with the same things I'd witnessed. Each one ending with survivors being questioned, discredited, and silenced. 61 years, I whispered, reading the dates. "You've known about this for 61 years. The phenomena you encountered represent a significant threat to global stability," the woman said. "Public knowledge of these discoveries would cause mass panic, economic collapse, and social breakdown on an unprecedented scale." I kept reading. The reports described systematic testing of the network's responses, deliberate triggering of the containment protocols, careful documentation of the creature's behavior patterns. They weren't just covering up accidental discoveries. They were running experiments. "You're using people as test subjects," I said. "Every mission is designed to provoke a response so you can study it." "We're trying to understand something that could threaten human civilization," the man replied. "The knowledge we've gained has prevented catastrophic breaches of the containment system." Containment system. I looked up from the files. "You know what it is." "We know what it does," the woman corrected. "The network appears to be a security mechanism designed to prevent certain entities from reaching the surface. Our research suggests it's been active for several thousand years." Several thousand years. A very old security system protecting something in the deepest places on Earth. And we'd been poking it with sticks for 6 decades to see how it worked. "What's it containing?" I asked. The 5 suits exchanged glances again. This time, nobody spoke. I closed the file and slid it back across the table. "You want me to sign your non-disclosure agreement and act like none of this ever happened?" "We're offering you a very generous compensation package," the woman said, sliding a new folder toward me. "Enough to ensure your financial security for life, plus a research position at any institution of your choosing." I opened the folder and stared at the number. It was enough money to buy a house, fund my own research lab, and live comfortably for the rest of my life. All I had to do was agree that everything I'd experienced was a stress-induced hallucination. And if I refuse? The man's smile turned ice cold. "Dr. Schmidt, you've been exposed to classified information that could compromise national security. We have legal authority to detain you indefinitely if we determine you pose a threat to public safety." Legal authority. They could make me disappear into some black site facility and nobody would ever know what happened to me. Just another researcher who had a breakdown after a traumatic deep-sea accident. I thought about Izzy, probably already on her way to Florida with enough money to start over. Smart woman. She'd seen which way things were going and made the practical choice. I thought about Russell, who'd known exactly what was going to happen to him and went down anyway. Maybe he'd been promised something, or maybe they'd threatened someone he cared about. Either way, he'd died to feed data to people who saw human lives as acceptable losses in their research. I thought about Aiden, who'd betrayed everything I thought science stood for, who'd looked me in the eye and lied about what we'd witnessed together.
and I thought about the thing in the depths, very old and patient and utterly alien, waiting in the darkness for the next group of researchers to trigger its protocols. I grabbed the pen and put my name on the non-disclosure agreement. "Excellent choice, Dr. Schmidt," the woman said, collecting the documents. "You'll find the compensation has already been transferred to your account. Your new research position will be confirmed within the week." I got to my feet, my legs still wobbly from whatever they'd been shooting into my system. One question. Of course. The network, the creatures, whatever's down there, is it getting stronger, more active? The woman's expression didn't change, but something flashed behind her eyes. "That's classified information, Dr. Schmidt. I'm sure you understand." I understood perfectly. They were terrified. Whatever they'd been studying for 60 years was changing, evolving, maybe getting ready for something they couldn't control. And they were running out of time to figure out how to stop it. I walked out of that beige conference room knowing I was now part of the conspiracy. Another witness they'd bought off to something that could reshape human understanding of our planet's history. They owned me now, purchased with money and threats. But they'd made one mistake. They'd shown me those files, let me see how much they were really hiding. And buried in those classified reports was information that could blow this whole thing wide open. I just had to figure out how to use it without winding up like Russell. The elevator doors shut behind me, and I began working out my next step. Some truths were too big to keep buried, even if speaking up meant losing everything I had left. I stared at the television screen in the faculty lounge, my coffee growing cold as the news anchor described the most ambitious deep-sea expedition in human history. The words "Challenger Deep" hit me like a punch to the stomach, and suddenly I was back in that cramped submersible, watching Russell get torn apart by something that wasn't supposed to exist. The international team will utilize revolutionary submersible technology to explore previously inaccessible regions of the Mariana Trench, the anchor continued, her voice bright with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for scientific breakthroughs in space launches. 7 years. 7 years of teaching, introduction to marine biology to community college students who thought the ocean was just a big swimming pool with fish in it. 7 years of pretending I'd never seen anything more exciting than a particularly aggressive sea cucumber. 7 years of waking up in cold sweats, remembering the way those glowing strands had sliced through flesh like it was tissue paper. The camera panned across the research vessel, and my blood turned to ice water. Same design as the ship we'd launched from. Same corporate logos on the hull. Same everything, just with a fresh coat of paint and newer equipment. Then they showed the research team, and I actually dropped my coffee mug. Dr. Aiden Lee stood at the podium, older now, but wearing the same nervous smile he'd had when he was 29 and lying through his teeth about bacterial mats. The caption identified him as Lead Marine Geologist, Deep Ocean Research Initiative. He'd been promoted. Of course he had. Our mission represents a new chapter in deep-sea exploration, Aiden was saying, his voice carrying that same calculated enthusiasm I remembered. We're particularly interested in studying the unique geological formations and biological communities that exist at these extreme depths. Geological formations, biological communities. The same sanitized language they'd used to describe the network and its guardians 7 years ago. I grabbed my phone and searched for more information about the expedition. The funding was massive, 3 times what our mission had received, with backing from organizations I'd never heard of, but whose names sounded appropriately scientific and legitimate. The crew roster included marine biologists, geologists, and deep-sea pilots from around the world. All young, all eager, all completely unaware they were being fed to something that had been waiting in the darkness for millennia. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the mission details. Same dive profile, same target coordinates, same everything, just packaged as cutting-edge research instead of what it really was, another round of human sacrifice disguised as science.
I needed to talk to Izzy. She'd understand what this meant, help me figure out what to do about it. I pulled up her contact information, which I'd kept updated through mutual friends in the diving community. The obituary was 2 years old. Isabella Curtis, 50, died in a diving accident off the coast of Key Largo while conducting routine equipment testing for her diving instruction business. Curtis was an experienced deep-sea pilot with over 20 years of experience and an exemplary safety record. The accident occurred during a solo dive to test new breathing apparatus, and her body was recovered 3 days later by Coast Guard divers. Solo dive. Izzy never dove alone, not even in shallow water. It was the first rule she'd taught me about deep-sea safety. Always have a buddy, always have backup, always have someone watching your back. I kept reading, my stomach sinking with every paragraph. The accident had happened just weeks after Izzy had contacted a publisher about writing a memoir of her diving experiences. The publisher confirmed she'd submitted a detailed proposal about extraordinary encounters during classified deep-sea missions, but declined to provide specifics about the content. They'd killed her. The same people who'd bought my silence with money and threats had decided Izzy was too much of a risk. A diving accident was perfect. Plausible, untraceable, and it sent a clear message to anyone else who might be thinking about talking. I closed the browser and sat in the empty faculty lounge, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of students complaining about their midterm grades. Normal sounds from a normal world where the biggest mysteries were whether the cafeteria would run out of pizza before lunch ended. But I knew better. I knew there were things in the deepest places that made human civilization look like a sandcastle at high tide. I knew there were people who'd been studying those things for decades, feeding researchers to them like treats to a pet monster. And I knew they were getting ready to do it again. The news report was still playing on the television, showing footage of the submersibles being loaded onto the research vessel. 3 of them, just like our mission. Same configuration, same crew size, same everything except the faces of the people who'd be climbing into those metal coffins. I thought about calling the expedition leaders, warning them about what they were really walking into. But who would believe me? A community college instructor claiming that deep-sea monsters were real and the government was covering it up. They'd think I was having a breakdown, maybe recommend some therapy and a nice long vacation. Besides, the people running this expedition already knew what was down there. This wasn't an accident or a coincidence. This was the next phase of whatever they'd been doing for 60 years, and the researchers were just the latest batch of test subjects. My phone buzzed with a text from my department head, reminding me about the faculty meeting in an hour. Normal life, pulling me back into its comfortable routine of lesson plans and grade reports and pretending the world made sense. I looked at the television one more time. The expedition was scheduled to launch in 3 weeks. 3 weeks for those eager young researchers to finish their preparations, say goodbye to their families, and climb into submersibles that would carry them to the bottom of the world. Some of them might even make it back. I turned off the television and gathered my things. I had a decision to make, and not much time to make it. I could keep my head down, teach my classes, and let another group of scientists disappear into the depths. Or I could try to do something about it, knowing that speaking up would probably get me killed. Izzy had tried to tell the truth, and look what happened to her. But maybe she'd been too direct, too obvious about what she was doing. Maybe there was a smarter way to get the information out there without painting a target on my back. I walked back to my office,
Past students who had no idea their professor was contemplating whether to expose a conspiracy that had been running since before they were born. The hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and teenage anxiety. Normal smells from a normal place. But normal was a lie. Normal was what they wanted us to believe while they fed people to things that shouldn't exist, studying alien technology that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about our planet. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. If I was going to do this, I needed to be smart about it. I needed evidence, documentation, something more substantial than the word of a community college instructor who'd signed a non-disclosure agreement 7 years ago. The expedition would launch in 3 weeks. That gave me time to figure out how to stop it, or at least warn people about what they were really walking into. I started typing, documenting everything I could remember about our mission. Every detail, every conversation, every moment of that nightmare in the depths. If I was going to break my silence, I was going to do it right. Some truths were too important to stay buried, even if telling them meant joining Izzy at the bottom of the ocean.